Okay, hello, Nathan and Nannette. Thank you for sitting for this talk. This is part of our Member Monday profile series and people who are disconnected because of the pandemic and the synagogue is not as active as it would be otherwise. So this is one of our ways of trying to connect everyone. So how are you guys doing?
Doing well, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Everything considered, we're doing good.
Good. Glad to hear it. So you guys are very well known here in Richmond for your participation and leadership within the Federation and various Jewish community nonprofits. So if you can tell our audience a little bit about what got you involved in Federation and why it's so meaningful for you and why you've stuck with it over the years for such a long time. Whoever wants to start, go ahead.
You go first.
Sure. I grew up in a house where my parents were very involved in community and many different things. And so just really expected that was something I would do, and something I wanted to do was to get involved and give back to community. Particularly Federation, I feel very strongly about the organization and the commitment that the Federation has to our community and to the greater community. And I feel through the work there, we really have an opportunity to touch so many people and help so many people really on a big scale. And so it's just stayed important because I think the work has really proven to make a difference for us here in our community, for our kids, for our grandkids, and for people in Richmond.
Sounds good. What about you, Nathan?
So
you've gotten involved nationally, right?
Yeah, fortunately, but kind of the same reason Nannette was involved. My family was involved, my parents, my grandparents were all involved in the local synagogue. There was no Federation or JCC in Raleigh. When I moved here, I just continued. Well, I was in BBYO and as an advisor, and that's actually how we met. So it's from 13 years old, have been involved in some form of organization in the Jewish world. Federation, as Nannette said, we're kind of the central fundraising arm. So we are the gathering place of what people need in the community, whether it's a synagogue, whether it's an agency, whether it's RTA, Beth Shalom Home. Everybody knows they can come to that central spot of senior leadership to help them in some form or fashion.
It sounds like, it sounds like BBYO and you guys met. So to a great extent, your communal involvement kind of gave you a lot of what you have today, and you're giving back in that way over all these years as well.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And I guess if you could tell us a little bit about what your backgrounds are professionally, what have you been involved with? And then we'll kind of go on from there to talk about how that relates to the nonprofit work. So tell us a little bit about yourselves professionally, if you can.
Sure. So I started my professional career working in my family business. We had retail stores throughout Virginia. When we closed the stores, I fell into working as a mortgage broker for 16 years. It was a great profession, and always had volunteered throughout all that time for different things in the community. And at that point, really decided that it was time to pick a career, and I decided I wanted to go work professionally in the nonprofit world. So I ended up at American Heart Association doing national fundraising for them. Loved that, but needed a change and ended up working, moving to a part-time position with the Cameron K. Gallagher Foundation. That position quickly grew into a full-time position. And at that point, about 3 years ago, I ended up going out on my own doing consulting. So now I consult for nonprofits and using my business skills and my nonprofit experience, advising nonprofits on how to be better and excel at their fundraising.
For 38 years, I've done commercial real estate, mainly on the retail side of things, where we help people like Dunkin' Donuts, Popeye's Chicken, Rio Car Wash, retailers handle their expansion plans throughout Virginia, not just the Richmond market. We also involved in shopping center development, sales, leasing, management. So interestingly enough, I've met a lot of people in that industry who are Jewish, who I have connections with through the National Federation, through a bunch of different organizations. And the outreach that actually gives us that common thread when we get together is really interesting. I can sit and talk with my partner in Houston, who's got a retail real estate group, about the floods that damaged and ravaged that whole community.
Right.
because we have that connection of Federation and JTC.
Yeah. So Nathan, I mean, it's very interesting. You've been your whole professional life in the for-profit world, and Nannette, you've had both of these kinds of experiences. So Nannette, how do they compare, and what have you kind of been able to blend together in terms of your skills and in terms of learning from one genre of work professionally to this other genre?
You know, it's interesting. All of my professional positions dealt in areas where there were life events, emotional events, whether it been our business was bridal and formal wear, so very emotional and very high energy. And then as I went to the mortgage business, also a stressful sort of life change. And then in American Heart, obviously dealing in health. And so while my professional world really gave me a lot of skills that I could apply to the nonprofit world, also working in those really high pressured, very intense fields, I think gave me a lot of perspective in the nonprofit world. And really what I do today is I work with a nonprofit, and I always say that we're going to approach their fundraising with the mission and lead with the mission. But at the end of the day, it's a business and they're spending community dollars, not their own. And so they have a different obligation. And so I think that's my business skills coming in, allowing me to help them look at it from a much more strategic, organized, professional level. And certainly from the heart is very important, but they have an obligation to be fiscally responsible. And I use that a lot.
And I guess, Nathan, kind of relatedly, but you know, sometimes your nonprofit volunteer positions have been full-time jobs. They have really kind of taken over a lot of things, and maybe even provide more aggravation than your regular day job on occasion. So I guess, how has the real estate business helped you? What kind of skills have you taken from the real estate business? And if you can think of moments within Federation or other volunteer positions, whether nationally or locally, what specifically perhaps have you gained from your real estate involvement in terms of employing some of those skills for nonprofit involvement in terms of your volunteer position?
I'd probably say I'm a professional negotiator. I look at myself in the real estate world as a mediator. We represent buyers, sellers, tenants, landlords, and it's our job to say to our client, the seller, that your price is too high so that we can make a deal with the buyer. By being that mediator, I've been able to transfer that in the not-for-profit world in the board situations, in getting a board to understand and the nuts and bolts of a situation. There's no question we've had some tough times over the years with the different volunteer aspects of what we've done. But the passion for professional life is transfers to the passion for not-for-profit, and just be able to mediate situations so it becomes a true win-win-win is the outcome, whether it's professional or volunteer lay leader. That's just the passion that you want to make for the community and the business world.
Well, thank you for that. I guess if we can transition a little bit, just slightly, Nannette, some people are new here in town, and maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourselves personally, about your kids, grandchildren. I know they're a source of pride, and tell us a little bit about the.
Happy to talk about them. We have 3 children. Marla's 31. Her and her husband, Josh, live in Ann Arbor, Michigan with their 2 children, Evelyn and Caleb, who are almost 3 and almost 1. And definitely those grandchildren are our world, along with our children. We love FaceTiming with them and seeing them when we can. Rachel's 29. She lives in New York and had actually spent about 4 months with us during the pandemic in the beginning. And it was wonderful having her back home. It had been a long time since she had lived with us. And
never lived with her by herself.
Right. As a middle child, she never did. So it was really fun. I would love to have her back. Adam and his fiance Michelle live in Northern Virginia, and he is 26 and getting married in September. So
how's that?
Kids' activities, watching them. Busy.
Right. What's that like planning for a wedding during a pandemic? How is that going?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a planner, so part of it is very difficult because we don't know what it's going to be. They decided when they got engaged during COVID that they were going to get married no matter what in September, and whether it's 10 people or 50 people or 100 people. And so planning with that in mind actually is a little easier than we have friends who are planning, do we plan the 200 person wedding? Do we wait? So on one hand, it's been a little easier, but we can't make certain decisions because we don't know if it's going to be either no one completely shut down, which I doubt, or just the immediate family and you, or a little extended group. And so it's good. It's fine. I love planning events, so I'm the helper. I'm not actually, they're planning it, and I'm doing a lot of legwork here. It's going to be here in Richmond, so I'm helping, doing a lot of the legwork here.
Speaking of the pandemic, so what have you guys been doing to kind of keep your sanity, maintain your sanity? We've been asking a lot of guests this question during the virus period here, the last difficult 10 months or so.
Yeah. We moved right in the beginning of this. We moved at the end of March, beginning of April. And I think if we look back, we sort of had to pretend things weren't really falling apart around us because we had no choice. We had to move. We were under contract. We'd sold our house, so for the very beginning, we obviously it was an issue for us, but we sort of had to focus on this and not focus on that. And then as we got settled, I think we focused a lot on settling in and doing a lot of buying online for the house, which wasn't normally the way I do things. And I jokingly say, like, neither of us really picked up any of those things people say. I became a great cook, or I got an extra degree, or I read, 50 books, or a new language. We didn't do that, but we caught up on a lot of series. We've watched a lot of television. We've exercised more together. What else?
Well, we have been extremely busy on the real estate side. Mm-hmm. And I've been going to the office. Our office is not open, but I have been going in. We moved our office as well in November. So because the professional side has been a huge distraction for me, because my clients are still active in opening new locations. The one thing we did get to do was actually spend more time with the kids in Ann Arbor and the grandkids, because they were more quarantined than we weren't going anywhere. So we actually made 3 trips up there in August and Thanksgiving, and at the end of the year, driving there. It's an easy drive where we could quarantine here, drive there, and then spend at least a week plus time with them.
Now, I guess,
but on the kids, by the way.
What's that?
Well, I was going to say on the kids, and you talk about how we got involved was through our parents and grandparents. All the kids are involved. Marla's on the executive board and treasurer of the Ann Arbor Federation. Josh is on the day school board and the JCC board.
Wow.
Rachel is an advisor for BBYO in New York and involved in Federation. And Adam and Michelle met at a Shabbat dinner at Chabad at Hillel when she was a senior in college.
I was going to ask you about that. Raising a family in Richmond, raising a Jewish family, what was that challenge like, kind of looking back on those childhood years? And, what kind of strategies did you use to try to keep them connected, which is a relatively small Jewish community and a pretty secular environment? And what was that like? And looking back on that, what things kind of worked, and what were you trying to accomplish?
It's a great question. And I always knew, I didn't go to RTA, my sister did, but we knew when we first got married that we would want our kids to go there, because we know growing up in Richmond, you have to work to be Jewish. And if you want it to be the central part of your life, you have to make it that way. Unlike, I went to University of Maryland, any given class, everyone I was sitting around happened to be Jewish, and you could create that connection. But what we knew very young, it wasn't going to happen here, just because of the way I grew up at going to Richmond City Public Schools and going to Hebrew school, and BBYO was a huge part of my life. We knew that we had to make that. And so sending them to day school was very, very important. The girls went through 8th grade, Adam went through 5th grade. And I think that was crucial for us to help ensure that they were taught the things that we weren't taught as children, or we are still learning, and we learned from them. But I felt like it was important for them to do the dance and the soccer and the baseball, but also have those Jewish things in their lives. The youth group, BBYO, whatever we could make sure they were involved in that kept them within the Jewish community was really important. And, like anything, we wanted to give them everything we could, and they make choices about their lives later
Right.
on with all the information.
And
Yeah,
I guess,
the JCC was an important part too, because they did preschool at the JCC. So they grew up at the JCC. They saw my involvement. They knew their mother was in preschool at the JCC. So that was their second home. Adam would walk in anywhere and think he owns the joint, but they would all feel very comfortable in their skin, in that environment, in their skin as a Jew, and having the Shabbat dinner. And it's like Nannette said, with RTA, that just gave them an even stronger base of knowledge and a foundation, so they would know how they wanted to live as a Jewish adult, as opposed to what we may want to impose upon them or would have wanted them to do. It gave them the base to do that. And that was just a solid foundation that they were able to get there.
That's really great. And what about Israel? Because I know in all of your volunteering, you've made Israel a focal point in a lot of your kind of programs and contributions. And even for your family, have very close connection to Israel. What kind of fostered that relationship and that interest, and how has that played a role over the years?
A very important role for us. My parents, when I was young, made their first trip to Israel, and it became a focal point for them. My dad became very involved in bringing the Israeli Scout caravans to Richmond, which besides COVID still do come to Richmond. And we had friendships going back to when I was 16.
40 years.
Thank you. Then when I was 16.
Ooh, that told your age.
It's fine. To people that we still keep in touch with. Also have friends that live here, people I grew up with that live in Israel, friends that we made as adults that live in Israel. And so Israel was always very important. I went in high school, and then Nathan and I actually spent a summer there. And as a result of that, we decided we were going to get married. So that was good. That was a realization that summer that we knew this was something we wanted. But it was also very important for our kids to go and for us to take them. And we took them in the summer of 2006. And going as a family, I had gone my first time with new friends, and through youth group through BBYO, but taking them as a family, we still laugh about some of the memories that we have on that trip. And it's a huge part. That feeling of the love for Israel and the support for Israel, I believe, runs through all of our children as well as us, and it continues. And my friends who were KBI members, the Steins who live there, we talked for an hour and a half the other day, and again today for an hour. It's like they're next door and are closer now for some reason than even when they were here, because we have to make sure we keep up the connection, and we have a reason to go and to visit them, and keep in touch with my friend Eileen Peters, Dorothy Weiser's daughter, who, we've been friends since we were born. And but on a greater scale, Israel is just very important to our family to maintain that relationship and the love for it.
We still stay in touch with the Israeli athletes that came over for the Maccabi games in 2003 when they went to Houston with our Richmond delegation. I still follow the 2 or 3 of those people now, and their chaperone that came with them, we would try to see when we go to Israel. That's 17 years later.
Yeah, I think, Nathan, you're kind of known as Mr. Maccabi a little bit here, kind of before I got here, but that legacy kind of lives on. But I guess it would be real interesting. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about your sports connection. I mean, your children have been so involved in sports, even more so than most people. Where does that come from? How did that happen? And if you can kind of detail for some people who don't know what your family is now involved with so extensively, traveling to St. Louis and Boston, New York, and all these different.
So I'll attack that one. Rachel is always loved sports. She's the middle one. She played soccer. She played basketball at the JCC. She loved it. And we happened to walk into a Nats game at the old RFK Stadium when they first came to town. She saw that professional baseball field and she fell in love. She says, I think I'm going to work in baseball. And that's what her career became until she moved to the Islanders a year and a half ago when they recruited her away from the Red Sox, always in Major League Baseball. Adam was, when he was going to JMU, He's like, oh, do I go to accounting like Marla or do I go to sports like Rachel? He's like, I played baseball. Let's try sports. And his first job right out of college was with the Washington Nationals, and he's still there. He's a senior account executive. And it's pretty crazy that both Rachel and Adam have World Series rings.
Right.
And they
Don't
have
forget
both
the
stayed under contract.
NLCS. Don't forget St. Louis.
Yeah, it's a loser ring to the Red Sox.
But Adam even more so. I mean, he always loved sports. All of them did, Marla included. They all played basketball at the JCC. They all always loved sports. So Nathan was very lucky to have two girls first who love sports and didn't have to count on Adam. But Adam didn't really know what he wanted to do, and he went to JMU and he toured. And you happened to meet a professor in the sports management who happened to be Jewish. So again, making that connection. And I think sports was on his mind. I don't think accounting really ever was, but I don't think he knew what he wanted to do. And when he met that professor who really had an impact in just the short time that they met, and he knew he would have a friend at JMU who really he still stays in touch with, it's been a great career for him. You know, whether it'll be forever and as a career, who knows? I mean, Rachel's definitely invested into making this her career. But it was a great time for him to be at the Nationals. And those, for them, it's been hard during the pandemic. They're used to being out at the stadium and during the season, and it's been a very different experience. But I finally said, if I'm going to be a part of this family, I have to love sports. So I just threw in the towel and joined in, and really missed going to the games this past year and not being a part of an opening day or a playoff or whatever. So it has been a fun thing for our family to really enjoy and be a part of. And we feel very fortunate to have the opportunity to have gone to the playoffs and World Series. And
one of the culminations of the sports was last year when the Nats went to the World Series. Marla, Rachel, and Adam were all at the game together. And there was a picture of them at the World Series game, and sports meant so much. Everyone loved the Nationals. Marla's got the little Orioles in her now because of Josh, but they just loved that connection to the Washington Nationals, and the fact they all got to go to game one and be there together was just it was really cool for them, and even probably cool for us.
Yeah, I just happened to scroll across that picture of the three of them the other day, and it really made me smile because it really tied together that's something that we all bond over. And Marla's still a Nationals fan.
It's really unbelievable to think of how many victories there have been and championships in your family. It was a great Richmond Times-Dispatch article as well.
Thank you.
Those of you who had a chance to see that, or go look it up. But besides Maccabi games and arranging that tournament for Richmond and for all the related communities and partnerships there, are there any other moments or programs you look back on in terms of your volunteering within the Jewish community that you have, a special pride in, or a sense of accomplishment with any particular projects or programs?
Sure, cooking latkes for the Jewish Food Festival for KBI. What else would there be, Rabbi? You set that one up.
Waiting for that. Yeah, the money's on its way. Yeah, exactly.
I think I could probably speak for both of us that any leadership role we've taken, we've gotten more out of personally in knowing that we've done a good thing for the community, or tried to do a good thing for the community. And I think we feel like we've gotten more out of it than the organization did. And so there's a lot of pride in looking back and saying we were part of the growth of Richmond Jewish community. And there are different opportunities, but I think in general, I would probably speak for both of us.
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint one. I know a lot of people in the community talk about the Israel showcase or whatever. Israeli showcase is kind of being their thing. I would say the Maccabi for 3 years would be more mine than Nannette's, and certainly more mine than most of the community. But it's hard to put your finger on anything else because it's when you jump into it with a passion, you're not doing it for you. You're doing it for your family and for the community, and that's just the way we feel about all of our involvement.
It's very impressive because there's a real theme here. Because you spoke about how Israel, in a sense, has given so much to you personally, and the youth group gave so much to you personally, and you've invested so much back into those entities. So I see a little bit of a running theme here, which is really great. And, a special thanks for everything you've done for Jewish Student Union and helping out local teenagers with that, and giving back to that as well. I guess one other question relatedly is, what made you decide to be a part of Life and Legacy, to be a part of something that will kind of be beyond you? What was your motivation for that specific involvement?
Yeah, it's a great question because I don't think we thought a lot about whether we would do it or not. And I think we just said we were going to do this because whether our kids end up here or our grandchildren end up here, this community gave us so much. And we want to make sure it's there, whether they do or not, but for other people and for other generations to come. We have so much to offer here, and we've grown so much, and our Jewish community is so unique that we want to help preserve it and help it grow. And so Life and Legacy for us was, I don't really believe we ever had a discussion about whether we were going to do it, but what we would do. We just want to make sure that Richmond continues to grow and thrive for the generations to come. Pretty simple.
Well, and to add on that, having been campaign chair for Federation as well as past president, believe it or not, I love picking up the phone and calling donors and having the Jewish conversation with them and talking about what we do and why we do it and why should they give money. But realistically, the easiest gift that we get every year as a community is from endowment.
Right.
And that's not just us, that's every community, that's every college. And if we don't perpetuate that gift, then unfortunately, when we pass away, someone may not be able to just backfill our shoes financially. So if we have an endowment, it helps offset some of that situation. So by the way, the endowment can be as big or as little as you want. So from a plug perspective,
Yeah, we've
just commit for when you're gone, whether it's $100 or $100,000, it doesn't matter.
It's very helpful, and it really supports this community of giving and making that part of the culture, which is so important. But I want to thank you both for your time. We're trying to figure out how to connect with people virtually. It's been a hard time for a lot of us, and this is part of this series. We're learning about each other, even though we're not, physically with each other as much. So thank you both very much for taking the time to sit for this, and I look forward to connecting in person as soon as we can.
Thank
so
you.
we're gonna do that after Shabbat get together as soon as it warms up, when we can be outside.
You
And
got
I'd
it.
love to have you and some other community members over just to sit and chat.
Yes, thanks very much. Thank you both.
Thank
Shabbat
you.
shalom.
Have a Shabbat.